Stay frosty and head over to EasyMut.com for the cheapest MUT coins on the market. And when I say cheapest, I mean it. We're talking 1 million coins for around 40 bucks. Use code DIRECTOR for 5% off. Yo, what up, brothers? What's up? It's the Director. Chargers fans, you guys ready? You guys ready to talk some off-season acquisition targets, more specifically positions of need that the Chargers can be targeting this off-season? And of course, we're going to be starting with the cornerback position in today's video. Now, if you would have told me like a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a month ago, if the Chargers' biggest off-season move would have been cornerback again after getting Chris Harris Jr., I'd have said there's no way. We still need offensive linemen. However, if you guys remember, a couple days ago, I did tweet out some of my first impressions of Brandon Staley, and I got looking into a lot of his tape of what made his 2020 Rams defense so incredibly impressive. If you scroll down here, I'm going to read this part aloud. This one's pretty important why we're doing this video today. It was obvious Jalen Ramsey was a big part of his scheme. By taking away his opponent's best receiver, he was able to play his safeties closer to the line of scrimmage to help shut down the run. This makes me believe the Chargers' biggest offseason signing might be a premier corner. But who? But who indeed? Now that's where this video comes in, guys. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 corners the Chargers should be targeting in the 2021 off-season. We'll also be talking about the cap situation a little bit and why it might make sense for the Chargers to go after an upgrade at corner rather than just signing a cornerback outright. So before we do get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this video. Lights, camera, action. The top 10 cornerbacks the Chargers should target in the 2021 offseason. Now, this can involve trades, the draft, free agency, all of the above. So first off, why do the Chargers have a need at cornerback? Well, it's probably pretty obvious if you're a Chargers fan watching our defense this season. It wasn't great. Our number one cornerback in Casey Hayward showed huge levels of decline in the 2020 season. Honestly, he has the potential to bounce back, especially with Brandon Staley, but cutting him would result in almost $10 million in savings towards the cap. It's definitely something you got to consider. We could definitely also try and trade him for maybe a late pick. He's a little bit old in the tooth or long in the tooth. We could probably get something back like a 5th or 7th rounder. I mean, you can't really be picky at that point. He's at the twilight years of his career. Next up on the depth chart, we did have Chris Harris Jr., who did work with Staley, of course, with Denver in that defense. They got a lot of chemistry. Chris Harris had a lot of good things to say about Brandon Staley. I do think he stays, as I do still see him as a premier slot cornerback in the league. Even though he's a little bit older, I think that chemistry is something you're going to want to work with in the first year with Brandon Staley. And then finally, Michael Davis, who I think in the 2020 season may have ended up being our best cornerback. Had a spectacular year. He definitely was great, is what I'm trying to get to. And I'd be really comfortable with him being our number 2 cornerback going forward. The thing is, do we re-sign him? He's a free agent this upcoming season. What is he worth to the Chargers? To me, I think on a cheaper deal, our number 2 cornerback going forward, I'm very, very comfortable with that. Now, lastly, before we get into the top 10 here, we do need to discuss the Chargers cap situation just a little bit. The Chargers will have roughly between $25 and $30 million in cap space going into the offseason, but this could easily be restructured to come somewhere above $50 million because new head coaches usually like to bring in and recruit talent that fits their vision more specifically. And to do that, there's going to be a lot of contracts that are restructured, maybe even cuts and trades that we might see. So honestly, just don't be surprised if a lot of moves are made in favor of helping the cap to bring in more specific players that fit his vision. So with that, guys, let's get into our top 10 defensive backs or cornerbacks that the Chargers should target this upcoming season, starting at number 10 with William Jackson, free agent. This would be a free agent acquisition. Now, a lot of Chargers fans are probably looking at this and being like, Director, we're talking premier corner, are we not? William Jackson doesn't exactly scream premier corner to me, and you'd be right. But honestly, we're talking about like the Chargers are maybe on a budget. We're looking for a guy that can come into the scheme, maybe elevate himself with the Chargers like we saw with Casey Hayward when we first signed him, and give us a guy that can really help out in that aspect, because honestly, corner is kind of that point. We're at the point where it needs to be addressed. And William Jackson is not a bad target if you ask me. He ran a 4.37, very fast. He's decently tall, 6 feet tall, and a former first-round pick. He's also only 28 years old, and he would only command somewhere between $6 and $7 million annually. So I really do think this would be a budget signing by the Chargers. There's a chance that he fits our scheme very well, and that kind of speed is what we're going to need to combat guys like Tyreek Hill, those fast receivers that we have in the AFC West. So you guys, as we go along, let me know what some of your favorites are. You can type in the comment section. I like the William Jackson. You know, it's cap friendly, this and that. Give me a good reason as to which one of these guys are your favorites, and then maybe guys that I don't have listed here. Let's get to our number 2 pick. I should say a number 9 on this list. This is going to be another free agent acquisition, this time in Xavier Rhodes. Now, Xavier Rhodes, I'm not going to lie, the man kind of sucked his last season in Minnesota, and there's a lot of people, you know, really skeptical as to why the Indianapolis Colts signed him. Then you kind of take a look at the situation here, right? 1 year, $3 million, very low risk, high reward, only over 1 season, and honestly, it was a prove-it deal, and at the end, he did kind of prove it. He had a resurgence with the Colts and honestly started looking like his old self in his good days in Minnesota. And honestly, these are the kind of players that you would look at. I mean, he's 30 years old, almost 31 years old. Kind of, I would call him buffer players, right? Buffer players to buy yourselves time to find another cornerback next season, maybe help your rookie cornerbacks develop. And if he can have any semblance of what his good days were with Minnesota, he's definitely a good fit for the Chargers. And again, Brandon Staley could definitely bring the best out of him. Next up, it's a name that you guys have heard me talk about before, coming in at our number 8 spot. This is going to be Jalen Ramsey via trade. Okay, now I know, again, the eye rolls are coming. I'm going to tell you guys he's at number 8 on my list for a reason, okay? The only reason he's at number 8, not number 1, is because the trade would be very complicated to pull off for the Chargers. Of course, there's reasons why Jalen Ramsey himself would want to come play for the Chargers. He's got a really good relationship with Derwin James, with our new head coach, Brandon Staley, and honestly, the Rams themselves aren't in the best cap situation right now, so maybe a trade is in their best interest, and they have very little draft capital to work with, so maybe getting something back for what they traded Jalen Ramsey for would be in their benefit as well. The problem here is that his contract is so sticky, it's so complicated that the fact that the Rams would trade him and all is kind of a minimal at this point. You'll see here that they'll have $5 million in dead cap here, $15 million dead cap in 22. They would save $17 million, but in retrospect, you're only talking about $2 million. So it really would come down to draft capital. The Chargers would have to be willing to give up a lot to get Jalen Ramsey, and then we'd have to make him fit our books as well. But again, the plus side of all of this is what Brandon Staley was able to do with Jalen Ramsey with the Rams. It was very evident that he was very reliant upon Jalen Ramsey. So I'm going to put him here at number 8. It's not super likely, but it's definitely one of those guys that are on my radar because of his relationships with Chargers players and staff. Okay, next up, let's get into our number 7 guy here, Stefon Gilmore via trade. Now, Stefon Gilmore, obviously one of the best man coverage cornerbacks in the league right now. The Patriots aren't in the worst cap situation, so to get him via trade just to dump some money off the books, even though there would be very little dead cap. I mean, no, never mind, $7 million in dead cap. I was only looking at 22. Either way, the chances that we get him are probably super small as well. But again, it would be coming down to what kind of trade can we make happen to give them some value as far as draft picks. So for a 30-year-old cornerback, a second, third round pick is probably kind of high. But at the same time, you're talking about giving Brandon Staley the kind of tools that he needs to kind of try and reproduce what he had with the Rams. So he's going to come in at number 7 for me. I think it would be a pretty good signing by the Chargers, but again, a temporary one to help us into the future. And talking about temporary, we're going to get into our number 6 guy now, guys. Here's a free agent acquisition for the Chargers in Richard Sherman. Now, in this one, I put in his calculated market value, so you guys can kind of see where I'm pulling these numbers from. Richard Sherman, as of right now, he's getting close to 33 years old, would only command around $7 million annually, which is pretty friendly versus the cap. I still think Richard Sherman has some juice, man. Of course, his days with the San Francisco 49ers were still pretty elite, and he only allowed 199 yards when targeted in 2020. That's pretty spectacular, but again, he's old and he's a little slow. And when you put him up against Tyreek Hill in the AFC West, are we going to see the same results? I don't know, man. It's very difficult to say, but still a great buffer cornerback, a great bridge cornerback coming into the league. Help maybe one of our young guys develop, or give Brandon Staley some time to find some other pieces. And again, it would be a very short-term, cheap contract, likely again for around $7 million annually. So that's not too bad. Next up, we're getting into our top 5 here, guys, and this is where things get really interesting. There's a couple of very interesting names in here, and this is one that I've talked about before, maybe for a long time, even before I started talking a lot of Chargers stuff. At number 5, free agent, we're looking at Patrick Peterson. Now, there were talks a while back that Patrick Peterson might be coming to the Chargers. Of course, those were shut down. He remained with the Arizona Cardinals, but I would say he's on the pricier side of cornerbacks above the age of 30. He's going to be around 31 when the season starts, and honestly, that kind of money, it's a little bit sketchy for any team, even us. But I still do consider Patrick Peterson among the elite cornerbacks of the season. And if you're talking to me, the best like possible buffer cornerback that you could pick up right now, well, you know, one of the best, most talented, that's worth the money, that could help us build, you know, our cornerback depth in the coming years via the draft or free agency. I like Patrick Peterson quite a bit, even though he is a little bit older. And his upside versus Casey Hayward is pretty obvious. You got to remember the money we'd save from cutting or trading Casey Hayward would be around $10 million anyway. So you would be thinking about upgrading to Patrick Peterson from Casey Hayward in this instance. Honestly, I really do like it. Now, getting in at number 4, we're going to start talking about draft prospects as well, because honestly, the Chargers could get these players every which way, and one of them is the draft. So the next guy we're going to talk about at number 4 is J.C. Horn. Now, a lot of people, when they look at J.C. Horn, myself included, they kind of compare him to a better Michael Davis, which is interesting because the Davis, you know, saw a lot of success with the Chargers in 2020. And honestly, if we can get that kind of production out of him, I think the Chargers, with a little bit of development, could really lean on J.C. Horn to be the number 1 guy in the near future. Obviously, this is a situation where we keep Casey Hayward. We hope for the best and hope that J.C. Horn's development is very, very quick. And honestly, when you're talking about rookies, my confidence that if they come into a Brandon Staley system, their development should be pretty smooth and honestly maybe a little bit quicker than if they were drafted by another team. So I like it. He's excellent in zone coverage. He's got elite potential with development. I think J.C. Horn would be an excellent first-round pick, but you got to remember, if the Chargers go J.C. Horn at number 13 overall, we're likely giving up on a really good offensive line prospect, so you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons here. But guys like J.C. Horn are rising to my more likely picks because of Brandon Staley and the way he's probably going to want to build this defense. Coming in at number 3. This is going to be the most insane one you guys see today. I don't know if I've talked about this signing, this potential, too often, but I think it's one of the more likely that could happen via trade. And honestly, this could be the biggest trade in the NFL season that would benefit the Chargers. I think, you know, shake the NFL as a whole. At number 3, we're going to talk about trading for Marshon Lattimore. Now, again, I feel the eye rolls, but this one, there's a lot of sense to make of this, okay? The Saints being the biggest one. The Saints as a team themselves are in a bit of a pickle. This team are $100 million over the cap in 2021. Let me repeat. The Saints are $100 million over the cap right now. That is insane. And then you see superstar names on their roster like Marshon Lattimore. What are the odds that they're going to be able to re-sign him or extend him into the future while being $100 million over the cap? In my opinion, this just kind of makes it feel like trades and cuts and restructures are all imminent at this point. And maybe Marshon Lattimore is one of those guys that the Chargers target because the Saints are in this situation. Now, of course, Marshon Lattimore to me is a top 3 cornerback in the league. The guy is absolutely insane. He's probably not as good as Jalen Ramsey, but really, how much worse is he than Jalen Ramsey? It's very, very close. He'd be an instant fit and difference maker to this Chargers defensive backcourt. Honestly, you know, again, creating the best defensive backcourt in the league if you pair him up with Derwin James. And the Chargers would definitely be able to afford this because, again, we got a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract for the next 4 years. So Marshon Lattimore, man, I feel like this is absolutely possible. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. Again, $10 million is what it would cost to trade for him. Maybe we do cut Casey Hayward in that case to make space for him, but it would also likely cost us around a first-round pick to get him. And again, with only 1 year left on his contract, it's kind of risky. But I also have to reiterate that he only has 1 year left in his contract, and the Saints are $100 million over the cap. So maybe that's enough leverage to possibly pick him up for a lot less. And I'm talking like a second or third round pick. And in retrospect, if you're the Saints and you know that you're not going to be able to afford Marshawn Lattimore in a couple of seasons, a second and third round pick is probably not a bad move to make. I don't know, man. And again, it would cost him no dead cap in a trade situation with them. They would have to re-sign him for somewhere between $15 and $17 million annually if they want to keep him. I don't know if that's possible, but with the Chargers, it would be. It'd be a lot of money to dedicate to the cornerback position, but we would have a top 5 corner to run in Staley's system throughout his entire tenure, which is very interesting, and it would fit exactly what he needs with the Chargers. So that's going to be my number 3. Again, only my number 3 because I feel like it's not as likely, but out of the cornerbacks I've seen via trade right now, it's the one that gets me the most excited. So enough about Marshawn Lattimore. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section about that one. I was kind of like excited when I started looking into the prospect of a trade there. At number 2, we've got another draft prospect coming in at Caleb Farley. Oh, gosh, guys. I got to tell you, Caleb Farley is probably my favorite cornerback in the draft this season. I know a lot of people are like, what about Patrick Surtain? Patrick Surtain is great too, which I would be very excited to pick up in the draft. But Caleb Farley, I told you guys this in a live stream a couple weeks ago. He reminds me and a lot of other people of Antonio Cromartie. Imagine having a young Crow on this team at this phase of the Chargers, going defensive heavy with Brandon Staley, a 6'2" physical beast of a cornerback. That's very exciting to think about. Very excited to think about. And Caleb Farley, man, he's a goon. He's excelled in man coverage, zone coverage. His traits to develop into a shutdown corner are very evident. I don't know, man. When it comes to the cornerbacks in this year's draft, this may be my favorite. I love the idea of Caleb Farley on the Chargers. The only reason he's not number 1 on my list right now is because of injury concern. He's had some injury problems the last couple of years, one a non-contact ACL, I believe. That's kind of scary when you're talking about the Chargers' injury history as well. But Caleb Farley, man, he's worth rolling those dice on for, man, because I feel like he could develop into a number 1 corner for the Chargers. And again, behind Casey Hayward, maybe having a year or 2 to learn. That's a really good case scenario for Brandon Staley's defense going forward. And at that point, I think you guys know who my number 1 guy is going to be, right? My number 1 on this list for the targets the Chargers should target this offseason for cornerback is definitely going to be Patrick Surtain II. Now, again, Caleb Farley's my favorite because I just feel like he fits this team so well. He's very athletic and all that, but I do think Patrick Surtain is the number 1 overall cornerback in a lot of people's lists for a reason. The biggest one being, again, he doesn't have the injury concerns that Caleb Farley does. Already, that's a huge bump, right? But when we're talking player comparisons, this guy reminds, it's kind of funny when you're thinking 1A, 1B with Antonio Cromartie. What's 1B? Back then, he reminds a lot of people of Nnamdi Asomugha, right? Tall, disruptive, physical. He shows the traits to also be a shutdown corner at some point. This would be a very, very good pick for the Chargers. I don't know if he would make it to us at number 13, but maybe a trade-up scenario is available. Maybe a lot of other players or other teams trade into the top 10 to get themselves a quarterback. So it's not impossible for him to land with the Chargers, nor is it Caleb Farley. The only concern I have about Patrick Surtain is that he's not the fastest guy in the world, so he wouldn't keep up with guys like Tyreek Hill very well. But still, when you're talking about trying to grab yourself the closest thing to a shutdown corner instantly in the league, as far as the draft, Patrick Surtain's got to be at the top of a lot of people's lists. He's got insane football IQ. He's got insane positioning. He utilizes his size to disrupt catches all the time. I really like the vision of this kid. So honestly, Patrick Surtain is going to be my number 1 guy the Chargers should consider this offseason when it comes to the position of cornerback. But now comes you guys. Who do you guys want the Chargers to target when it comes to the cornerback position this year? There's a couple of ways to go about it, right? The William Jackson, at number 10 on this list, he's a little bit cheaper, but he is faster and would probably help the Chargers in combating specific players like Tyreek Hill in the future. And then there's the guys that, like, go for broke. Let's go get Marshawn Lattimore. Maybe it costs us a 1st or 2nd round pick and a lot of cap space, but boy, howdy, do we have a really good scheme that mimics what was successful with the Rams last year that their defensive coordinator, now our head coach, could utilize going into the future. It's very exciting to think about. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. As always, brothers, bolt up and stay frosty.